What's up, everybody? Hoping you're having a fantastic start to your Saturday and your weekend. Welcome into another episode of the OBR Draft Show. I'm Jacob, joined by my co-host, Mr. Bill Sparks, on the other side. Make sure you hit that subscribe and like us here on YouTube. If you're re-listening to this when it's not live, most of this show is reviewing stuff from last week and talking about it. We'll do a little bit of a preview at the end for week 3. So it is rewatchable if you don't see this live. Just understand that the last portion of it is not. So please make sure you go to the youtube.com/at the Orange and Brown Report and hit that subscribe, give us a thumbs up. We would greatly appreciate it. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing good, Jacob. Coming off some Friday night action that, was very, very enjoyable. I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room. We have to talk about how good Fernando Mendoza looked last night. And yes, I know it's against Indiana State. As a guy who lives in Indiana, I know how bad Indiana State is. I know how good Indiana looked last night. But there were some NFL caliber throws on Mendoza's tape last night that just blew it away, right? The fact is, when you have 6 touchdowns, when you have as many rushing touchdowns as incompletions, let me restate that, as many rushing touchdowns as incompletions as a quarterback, yes, it's a cupcake matchup. You can't take away everything, but man, he looked good last night.
It's really funny because you and I were talking about it before the game even started, that I had from it, and you can see his numbers on the screen from last night against Indiana State right now. For those listening to audio only, last night, Fernando Mendoza, the Indiana quarterback, 19 of 20 for 270 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had 19 rushing yards on 6 carries and a touchdown. No turnover-worthy plays, and he only played the first half. So I was talking to you about it before the game had actually started. I had forgot that they were playing on Friday night. Like, so I get thrown off by things like that because there for the longest time, like Friday night, there was no football, like not really. Like, and so like, I never think about that. And I had Fernando Mendoza on here to talk about I'd already made a slide for him to talk about what he did last week in week 2, which is mostly what we're talking about for most of this show. And, I was like, oh, he had played a cupcake, but like he was good and he was efficient and he was this and that and everything. And then this game happens. And I'm like, well, I guess when we talk about Fernando Mendoza, we're just going to talk about Indiana State. Yeah, we get, like Bill said, we get it. It's against a cupcake, but this is what you should do. If you are an NFL caliber quarterback, player of any magnitude, and you go up against a team like an Indiana State, you need to light them up. Like we had an example last week, and I'll talk about one of them here in a minute. There were a couple of NFL draft quarterbacks last week that went up against cupcakes that they were just okay or maybe slightly below okay. Like you've got to go and show out. And I thought in week 1 that Fernando Mendoza looked like a guy that was still a little uncomfortable in the Indiana offense. Like it seemed like he was not like he was pressing because he didn't have bad numbers. Like it wasn't like he was out there throwing 3 picks or anything stupid like that, but he just felt like he was adjusting to it. These last 2 weeks and last night in particular, he just looks like a dude in complete and utter control of his offense. Now he's got a big showdown coming up here very, very soon.
Yeah.
And
Illinois, it wouldn't shock me either if that's a college game day matchup, because you're talking Saturday night under the lights. And you're right, he showed a competency in this offense and showed control that you want to see when you're going up against a cupcake team. That's the one big thing you can take away is, does my quarterback look like he belongs? And last night against Mendoza, he looked like he belonged.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very excited for him to get into the Big Ten slate. I saw our friend Corey Kennan over at Daft on Draft. He was like, Mendoza had some of the best tape of any of these quarterbacks last year during summer scouting, but his stats weren't like gaudy. He's like, he deserved a stat patter, as what he tweeted out. And I'm like, he did. He feels like a Kevin Stefanski quarterback, just so we can be clear. Good arm, really smart. Like understands like I said, in complete control of the offense. So he really understands what's going on. He's got good mobility. I mean, he only has 19 yards on 6 carries. I want to also point out that there was a carry that he had for 2 yards that doesn't seem like much, but I think it was on a 3rd and 2 it might have been second down, but he ran for like 2 yards on like a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and 2 or something where he ran an extra yard or so past the sticks and just stepped out of bounds. So it was a small carry, but it was a first down, so it was him accomplishing the play.
Yeah, 100%. And we talked about it. Stefanski obviously loved the processor of Dylan Gabriel. That's why they went so highly on him. If they love that processor, imagine what they're going to get with Mendoza here, who my comp for him is Matt Ryan. In the same mold, he's mobile enough. He's not, but that's not his game. His game is to process from the pocket, win from the pocket, has an above average arm. It's not top flight like your boy that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. It's like a B to B plus arm. And I'll leave the nickname for you because we came up with a nickname the other night that I think you'll enjoy. But I was very, very surprised, and I enjoyed what Mendoza put out there last night, even with it being against a cupcake team.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to go out there and do the thing that you're supposed to do, and not everybody always does it. And you went out there and you're like, hey, just so you know, I don't belong against this level of competition. It's like, okay.
Bingo.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So now we'll move on. So originally his name was not in the title. There was a couple quarterbacks we wanted to talk about off the top. If you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. We're here live every Saturday, shooting for 10 a.m. every Saturday. It may end up being 11 or so here and there because we got some varying schedules that we'll have to deal with as the season goes on. But we're going to start this OBR draft show the same every week. We're going to talk about some quarterbacks, some good quarterback play and some bad quarterback play from the week before. Then we're going to talk about some stock up, stock down players. And then we'll even give you a quick overview of some matchups that are coming up this week. So your guy had a pretty good game. So I keep forgetting I have to do it like this. That's not, there we go.
There we go.
Wait, that's not who I thought it was, but yes.
Yeah, we'll roll with it. So yes, Dante Moore had we just talked about Mendoza playing up against the cupcake schedule. Dante Moore played against Oklahoma State, which is a Big 12 team, but it's not the Oklahoma State of 2008, 2009. But he went out there and he looked effective. We just talked about it, having control in the offense and looking like you belong as a part of the offense. You see the stats up on the screen there, 16 to 21, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns. The big number that I always take away from when I'm evaluating quarterbacks is how effective are they between the numbers, because that shows to me that you can process an offense, that you understand what you are looking at, because anybody can throw outside right or outside left. You can scheme things open through mesh concepts and things like that, but it's over the middle between the safeties, between the linebackers. That's really important. And I with this number, from 0 to 10 yards, Dante Moore has a 152.9 NFL passer rating. From 10 to 20 yards, has a 158.3 NFL passer rating. And from 20 yards and beyond, 135.4 NFL passer rating. He operates effectively over the middle of the field. And when I watched his game the other night, I kept flashing back to a quarterback that right now is playing in the NFC North, went number 1 overall. I just keep seeing Jared Goff every time I watch Dante Moore. Okay. I just keep seeing it. I see the whip-like release. I see, a very good pocket presence. I see a guy who can place the ball effectively in the middle of the field, has the arm strength. It's not a flamethrower, but he's got enough to be able to drive it through a tight window. Yes, he's not the most mobile guy in the world. Jared Goff ran a 4.8. I would expect Dante Moore probably to turn in about the same, 4.8, 4.7. But I'm very excited to see what Dante Moore is going to do. And he's got a big test today against Northwestern. Yes, it's Northwestern, but it's still a Big Ten competition.
Yeah.
And, he's a redshirt sophomore, so we may not see him in this draft cycle. But it's kind of like the conversation we have with Lenora Sellers and that we had with Arch Manning. If he plays well enough and he continues to stack performances like this, it's going to be very, very hard to not say number one, Dante Moore is deserving of the Heisman, but number two, he's not deserving of a top 10 pick.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those, like, he's one of those guys that was not on my radar, really. I don't think I watched him in the summer. Like, if I remember correctly, I would have to pull I don't have my notes up, my summer scouting notes up, but
Yeah.
I didn't watch him in the summer. And a lot of it was because I was like, oh, here's this inexperienced guy, he's going to finally get his shot, but like, there's probably going to be some growing pains and blah, blah. And he hasn't gotten into the Big Ten slate yet, but he's had two really good games. Like he's had two attention grabbing games where you're like, sometimes early in this season, that's what you end up being, kind of, having happen is these guys that you didn't expect to ball out grab your attention. You're like, oh,
Bingo.
Not that I thought he wasn't good, but just that I just didn't expect him to be really good, like, or to be this good this quick. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and when you watched his stuff at UCLA, where he got benched for throwing back to back to back pick sixes, like that's Dante Moore, and this Dante Moore are otherworldly. It's like measuring Mercury to Pluto with how far apart they are.
Yeah. It was, and that's what you want to see. And when I can see a prospect do that already, okay, let's have a conversation. Bingo. Now we're going to talk about my guy. I'm ready for this.
Let's do it.
Boom.
Moneyline Mateer.
Moneyline. That does actually work better than Venmo. It's a lot better than Venmo Mateer. John Mateer is a dude that I've been kind of bullish on since the summer. He was QB5 coming into the year. And I kept saying, if there's a guy, and it's funny because he transferred from the same school. I kept saying, if there's a guy that does a Cam Ward that goes from like day 3 pick where it's like, oh, he's got some tools, but like he's really rough around the edges, to number 1 overall pick, I thought that would be John Mateer. Like, I thought he could do that. And they both transferred from Washington State. So against Michigan, against a quality opponent, I think Michigan's defense is not bad. I think it's a pretty quality defense, talent-wise. Against Michigan, he goes 21-34 for 270 yards, a touchdown and an interception. He leads the team in carries and rushing yards at 19 carries for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. The thing that got me the most, an 87.9 grade under pressure, and he had a 72.2 passing grade overall. I think he had the two turnover worthy plays. So the one that he did throw, and then he had another one, but I think he had 3 big time throws. The thing that gets me about John Mateer in this game is that screams NFL quarterback, that screams a guy that's worth the risk, because he's a gunslinger. Like, he's going to make some throws and some decisions that you are going to smack your head off of a wall when you see. You're going to be like, brother, what are you doing? And it's because he has a very live arm. Like, he has got just a great arm.
Flamethrower.
Yeah, flamethrower is probably the best way. But when I'm like, can you put a team on your back and carry them to a win? And that's what John Mateer did with the offense, with his athletic ability, with his arm, like his leadership, his moxie. People just are like, I've heard so many people say he's a gamer that people gravitate to. He's a leader. Like, he didn't play a cupcake last week, and he may have had some of the best stats of the week from a quarterback standpoint. And I just think I'm so excited to watch him go through. He's got a gauntlet coming up. Oklahoma does. I forgot the order, but somebody was talking about it the other day. And he just, if you are a guy that's capable of putting a team on your back and carrying them to a victory, I mean, put it this way, he had 72 rushing yards. The team combined behind him that had over 20 carries had 64 yards. So the next leading rusher on his team had, okay. Casey, I'm not putting that on the screen, Casey.
Pause. Whoa.
Pause. Whoa. Okay. But like he was the next leading rusher after Mateer had 24 rushing yards. So it's like he was not getting help from his running game, and he had to put it on his back. And I thought Mateer was brilliant in this game. And he really showed that I think he can be a franchise NFL quarterback. But we're going to find out very soon because he's got a gauntlet coming up.
Bingo. And you talked about it. They've got Temple today, but then they've got Auburn, who's top 25. They have Texas at South Carolina versus Ole Miss, at Rocky Top against Tennessee, in Tuscaloosa versus Alabama, and then finish at home versus Missouri. And then, oh, by the way, Baton Rouge, Louisiana Tigers, LSU coming in to Oklahoma. Todd McShay talked about John Mateer, talked about Moneyline Mateer, and it makes a great point. His mechanics are what get me. This is a guy who plays like his hair is on fire. It's a fire drill.
Like his butt's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Everything's on fire. It's like he's like the meme of the dog sitting in the burning down house. Everything is fine. That is John Mateer 101. But we have this conversation, and Todd McShay brought it up on his podcast as well. Scotty Scheffler's mechanics as the number one golfer in the world, nobody questions it because he's just that good. People aren't questioning John Mateer's mechanics because he's just that good. My biggest nitpick with Mateer right now is you cannot continue to give him the ball at 50 plus times a clip in a game with his size. He's going to get banged up. It's going to happen. So if I'm Oklahoma, you've got to figure out this running game. You can't continue to rely on John Mateer to run the ball, even though he's effective at it, 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. You've got to be able to say, okay, listen, we know you have this ability to run the ball. We'll just stay in the pocket for a little bit. Like if you got to take off and run, take off and run. But doing it 19, 20, 21 times a game, that's going to eventually lead to him getting dinged up, and he's most effective when he's on the field.
Yeah, that was I agree with you, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in my stock down. One of my stock down guys here in a little bit, but yeah, he can't carry the ball 19 times. He's not Cam. He's not Cam Newton.
No, not at all. So the next one, this is my quarterback that I was down on last week, and it's Sam Leavitt from Arizona State. Look, when you play Mississippi State, it is SEC competition, but it's not Ole Miss. It's Mississippi State. The fact that you went 10 to 23 for 82 yards, 2 interceptions, only 6 carries for 46 yards, and your stats are a 31.4 passer rating. Sam Leavitt just did not look comfortable. He never got comfortable. He looked like he was pressing. He just looked like a guy who was like, I have to show that I'm this superstar quarterback against Mississippi State, and just didn't feel comfortable in the offense, which is shocking because you have a guy like Jordan Tyson out there who's a cheat code at wide receiver that you can rely on. But, I mean, when you're talking an average of 8.2 yards of completion, yes, you were effective, but there were a lot of passes that sailed, a lot of passes that didn't meet the mark, passes short. You could tell that everything was sped up for him. And it's a little disappointing, but this is the type of game that you eventually have with the redshirt sophomore, the younger quarterbacks. And I'm looking to see how he bounces back this week, because if he continues to put up these types of games, it's obviously a conversation of, hey, he needs to come back. But Sam Leavitt was one of those guys that we talked about. He was one of the Lenora Sellers, the Arch Mannings, the Dante Moores, the younger redshirt sophomore quarterbacks that could buck the trend and say, hey, we're going to come out because we're talented enough to do it. But yeah, I left that Arizona State game coming away very disappointed in Sam Leavitt.
He's a guy that was up there for me because in the preseason, a lot of guys were high on him because last year it felt like there was a lot of Cam Scatterbo carrying it. But when I rewatched it, I was like, hey, Sam Leavitt was really good last year. But then the question was like, what's he going to do without Cam Scatterbo? Like, and how's that going to go? And it's just been very, I don't know. He looks
young. Up and down. Yeah. He looks young. He looks like a redshirt sophomore, which is not a bad thing to be. But when you were being heralded as this guy from Arizona State, who could come out, who could be a star, who could be the next young quarterback, I've compared him play style wise to Jake Plummer. just a gambler, gunslinger, risky guy. It just looked to me like he rolled the dice one too many times against Mississippi State and got more than a few snake eyes.
Yeah. That's probably the best. It's probably the best way to do. Oh, so we already did. I was going to do Fernando Mendoza next when I was talking not about his game last week. Since we're going to skip it, Fernando Mendoza, it's the time for you to give your guys some flowers.
Yes.
I was wrong. I thought that was Aiden Chiles next.
Well, this is one of my guys. I've got a few guys that are flying under the radar at the quarterback position that I think deserve more love. And, shout out to Corey Kinnan. He's also been high on this guy as well. It's Behren Morton from Texas Tech. Listen, I know he played Kent State, but we talked about it with Mendoza. We've talked about it with Moore. You have to look good against the teams you're supposed to beat. You have to look like you're in control of the offense. And Behren Morton did that. 18 of 26 for 258 yards, 3 touchdowns, an NFL QB rating of 139.3 with an average depth of target of 10.4 yards. 3 big-time throws in the game. Time to throw, 2.4 seconds. That ball was out. He was making the read. He was being decisive. The ball was out quickly. He was operating within the offense like he should. And for me, I see a lot of another former Texas quarterback. I see a lot of Tony Romo when I watch Behren Morton. And I know that's high praise, but when you have a guy who can process quickly, has the enough of the arm, above average arm to make the plays, and then also is very mobile in and out of the pocket, just willing to make plays and is a gamer. Yes, I know it's against Kent State, but like we've talked about, you have to beat the teams that are in front of you. And he looked in control. He looked comfortable against Kent State. He's got another matchup today against Oregon State, which isn't top quality, but he's got to show that, hey, I am this guy that can command this offense, and I know this offense frontwards and backwards. He looked that way against Kent State last week. I think he looks that way against Oregon State this week. And for me, he's a top 100 guy that if you didn't want to take a quarterback in round 1 because you weren't confident on any of those guys, but you wanted to take a day 2 swing at quarterback, he'd be a perfect fit and could start for a team for 10 plus years if needed.
Yeah, I like him. He's efficient. That's the thing for me. Is he always feels like he feels efficient and confident in the offense. He was another guy that wasn't ranked preseason for me, but I'm like, okay, I can see it. I can see the appeal. Yeah. I got one that's a down guy. It's Drew Aller. Okay, I alluded to this earlier when I said that I was talking about him and Garrett Nussmeier, where they went up against subpar competition and they didn't line it up. He wasn't bad. So you're talking against FIU, 19 of 33, 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he had no big time throws and a 59.4 passer rating, passing grade against FIU. And for a guy in Drew Aller that we have talked about as a potential top 10 pick, he didn't look like a 3-year starter is what he didn't look like. Like this is his third year as a starter. We've talked about the mechanics kind of being a mess. He was fine in this game. And if you're going to be an NFL quarterback, if you're going to be a franchise quarterback that I'm hitching my wagon to, I don't want you to be fine against FIU. And the 0 big time throws I thought was interesting to highlight, to be like, he didn't really make any throws that wowed you really at all. Like he made enough plays. If you just look at the score of the game, you would have thought he played really well. They won 34-0, but like he just, I don't know. Like I don't have much to say about it this week because I'm not going to bury the kid right now, but like we talked about it with him last week where I said, yeah, I knew he played a cupcake game week 1, but he took care of business and looked sharp, and he didn't always look sharp against that level of competition in 2024. And then he follows it up by not looking sharp against that level of competition here in week 2. So he's got and it's not going to get easier opponent wise for him in the coming weeks. I don't think, who do they play today? It's not a big matchup today. In week 3.
I actually just had it pulled up, was just looking at it.
I was looking at it last night.
Villanova.
Yeah, so Villanova, so he's got an opportunity to be like, yeah, I can do it against these opponents. But keep in mind, after this, they get Oregon on the 27th.
Bingo.
So you got to get it together. You got to get it together quickly, and it was just a little disappointing for me.
100%. And you've talked about it with Mendoza. I talked about it with Moore. You have to look good against the teams you're supposed to look good against. And my biggest concern with Drew Aller the entire time, and why I hadn't had him as a round 1 guy, I had him as a round 3 guy, and I still do, is the mechanics that he has supposedly been working on with a private quarterback coach since the 9th grade just still look erratic. There's times where it looks like he panics. There's times where it looks like he just over trusts his arm and says, I don't care about mechanics. I've got a cannon, and just launches it. And that may work against the FIUs of the world. But when you get to the NFL level, the windows are smaller. The players are faster. They're bigger. You have to be able to push that ball effectively with your mechanics into tighter windows. I just don't know if he can do that right now. And yes, he's got Villanova today, but then his next matchup with Oregon's fast. Oregon's not an NFL defense, but they're fast. They're big. They're athletic. That game is going to be a major, major telling point about where Aller is in his career right now. But I was concerned when you see a guy against FIU who is as inefficient as he was, and let's not mince words, at 19 of 33, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. A lot of that came in the second half. They were not blowing the doors off of FIU in the first half. I think they were up 17-0 at halftime against that team. So I would temper your expectations on Drew Aller if you're a Drew Aller guy. I have not had him as a top 10 guy. I know some folks have. I'm not there yet, and he hasn't shown me anything to change that.
Yeah, he hurt himself last week, I thought. Yeah. But this guy didn't.
Let's talk about it. Okay. He has been my quarterback. He's been in my top 3 quarterbacks since May. He's my quarterback 2 right now because I have Arch going back to school. If you are not on the Aiden Chiles train, there's still time. Listen, 19 of 29, 231 yards, 4 touchdowns, 8 carries, 67 yards, and a touchdown. The big thing, 87% completion rating on the short and the intermediate game per PFF. So that's anything from 0 to 10 and 10 to 20. But here's the big thing. When you look at that game and you look at where he succeeded, the short in the middle part of the field went 5 for 5. Between the middle and the right hash, 5 for 5. 10 yards, 2 for 2 on the right hash. The short and the intermediate parts of the field, especially between the numbers and on the right-hand side, he succeeded. He also led his team down the field, brought them back. Everybody was counting them out, took it to overtime, and walked it off with a huge throw in the corner of the end zone. Yes, he's a junior. He's younger. He's still raw from certain aspects. Mainly the deep ball is just not there. It's just not clicking on his deep ball. And you saw it. You saw it in effect. 2 for 8 on passes of 20 yards or greater. That's not going to get it done in the NFL. You have to be able to threaten a team downfield. But you know who else struggled with their deep ball while they were in college, but did everything else great in the short and intermediate range, and then ended up going in the first round? Jordan Love.
Oh, Jordan Love had a game, didn't he?
Jordan Love had a game. And if you're telling me that if you're a team like the Browns, okay, so you have Joe Flacco, right? You have Dylan Gabriel, you have Shadur Sanders, but then in the first round, you can get a guy like Jordan, you can get a guy like Aiden Chiles, sit him for a year, let him work in Stefanski's offense, which operates predominantly where?
Under
short and intermediate, under center,
yeah.
But in the short and intermediate parts of the field and play action. Hey, listen, I'm just saying this right now. He's got a matchup today that's against Youngstown State, it's Youngstown State, right? We're not going to sit here and say it's not a cupcake matchup. But if he operates the way he should today against Youngstown State, listen, I've got him as QB2 right now, and I think that's probably where he'll sit for the most part. But then next week, They're on the road against USC in the Coliseum.
Yeah.
Another huge test. But it's finally time to start respecting the young Michigan State signal caller.
He was QB8 for me preseason just because I thought he was just kind of raw and rough around the edges. But I thought his numbers in 2024 didn't reflect how well he played. Because he had, what did he have, like 13 touchdowns, 11 picks or something like that in 2024?
There were significant amount of turnovers, both interceptions and fumbles. He just struggled to hold on to the ball.
I always like to say that I think he looks like Josh Allen when he runs, just in a sense that he runs with power and athleticism. So that was one of my summer scouting notes on him. I did not go back and get to see the Boston College tape yet, or maybe I did. Just to pull behind the curtain, there's so many prospects and so many games going on. Sometimes I lose track of what I have seen and haven't seen, and all the time I'll text Bill and I'm like, "Does this sound right, or am I thinking of a different player?" Because I've done that. And so like I've been writing about one player and I was totally talking about somebody else. I do that with Indiana and Illinois players. For whatever reason, I'll start writing on an Indiana guy and I'll be thinking about an Illinois guy, and like I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so dumb." Now it's time for the non-quarterback segment. Now it's time for stock up. We're on stock watch. Here's my first stock up. This is Elijah Surratt's numbers, not from last night, but from last week, because that's when I wanted to talk about him. He played well last night, but Fernando Mendoza in the first half last night, I think I had his stats. Hold on, I think I screenshotted the stats because I thought it was really interesting. I did. So Mendoza, like he had like six guys have a catch or two yesterday that was made what he did even more impressive with the way he was spreading the ball around. But Elijah Surratt, the wide receiver from Indiana, against Kennesaw State last week, 9 catches, 97 yards, 3 touchdowns. 7 of his 9 catches were first downs, and his average depth of target was 12.6, which means he wasn't getting layups, right? They weren't manufactured touches. He was 12 averaging he was at least 12 yards down the field on average when Fernando Mendoza threw to him against Kennesaw State. Again, it's Kennesaw State. I understand that. But like when someone puts up numbers like this, you got to say, "Hey, what you doing over there?" And you got to make a lead. You got to give it a little bit of love, a little bit of attention. I don't think Elijah Surratt, he's this guy. I don't think they're the same player. I think he's a little bit more dynamic. But he reminds me of a David Bell type in the sense where it's like he's not the twitchiest. He's pretty quick. He's pretty quick off the line of scrimmage, but he's not like a freaky athlete, but he's a guy that is a really nice route runner who gets open and catches the football, and he understands how to, especially against zone coverage. I love Elijah Surratt against zone coverage. He understands how to attack zone coverage really well. But I just equate him to a get open, catch the ball, move the sticks kind of guy. But who can actually make some really eye-popping contested catches because he can. But he's not like a crazy freaky athlete, but like he can do things like this, like grab 9 catches, have about 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I think a best way to describe Surratt, I think he's Mr. Reliable. You're like, I know what I'm getting out of him. He's very consistent. So while it might not be the freakiest of athletes, he's still a really good wide receiver, and you can never have enough of those guys.
100%. I think my comp for him has been Michael Crabtree, and that sounds lofty, but just like how Texas Tech relied on Michael Crabtree in the big moments, and then San Francisco in the big moments, that's what you get with Elijah Surratt. He is, you said it best, Mr. Reliable. Like he is the guy that you look to on 3rd and 7 when you need 8 yards, and that's just the best way you can describe Elijah Surratt.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you have this guy on your list today.
Yes, I had to. He's been a guy that has been high on my safety board. I've had him in my top 5 safeties for quite some time, but I now finally am glad to seeing him getting the love. It's Emmanuel McNeil-Warren out of Toledo. Listen, versus Western Kentucky, so let's temper some expectations, but Western Kentucky is a team that chucks the ball all around the yard. Maverick McAvoy is a guy who could throw for 700 yards and not blink. But the big thing with Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, an 89.3 coverage grade so far this season, did well against Western Kentucky, was targeted one time, allowed one catch for -1 yards. He allowed a catch. He said, you can catch the ball, but it's going to be behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Listen, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is a safety that, this is a guy very productive in the box. He's a strong safety through and through, very physical, plays with aggression, plays the run very well. Probably one of the best tacklers at the defensive back position in this entire class. And every time I see him, I see a taller version of Antoine Bethea when he was with the Indianapolis Colts opposite Bob Sanders. And you're telling me that if you could get him in round 2 or 3 and pair him next to Grant Delpit, I mean, that's 2 headhunting thumpers in the back end of that defense. And the big concern is, he doesn't really have the long speed. So that's where he struggles in coverage. But if he can keep it in front of him against some of the less athletic running backs and tight ends, man, this is a guy that if you have a team that you want your safety to do multiple things, support the run, cover, even play on special teams like Schwartz asks the Browns to do. I mean, listen, nothing says better than, hey, you're going to go from Toledo to Berea. Come on in.
Yeah, when you're playing in the MAC, like I think about him like I think about Harold Fannin last year, where it's like when you're playing against like the Western Kentuckys and the Bowling Greens and Kent States of the world, you need to stick out as being far above them, everybody else in talent level, if you're going to be considered a top NFL prospect. And that's McNeil-Warren. Like you notice him, you turn on that tape and you're like, oh, who's that guy? And you're like, yeah, that's an NFL prospect because he stands above the rest of them, in my opinion. I got Anthony Lucas, the pass rusher from USC here. Shout out to our friend Anthony Russo over at Draft Professor. Go make sure if you his at's Anthony Russo 97, I believe.
Yep, at Anthony Russo _97, I believe.
Yeah, so go follow him. He brought this to my attention. So against Georgia Southern, he had 3 pressures and 2 sacks. I know it was Georgia Southern, but he also had a 75.5 run defense grade and 3 stop tackles. This is a 275-pound man, and Anthony Russo brought it to my attention. This dude fires off the line of scrimmage. He was not a guy that was really on my radar, but I saw Anthony tweet out about him, and he tweeted a clip against of one of his sacks against Georgia Southern. I'm like, okay, I got to go back. I got to go get my hands on that tape, and I got to watch it because he's one of those big-bodied, strong, good run defender, but also like the get off for a guy at that size is like USC lists him at 285. I think it's 275. I think I've seen 275 and I've seen 285, but he's the big bodies edge setter who can also get at the quarterback. Like maybe a little Alex Wright in his game, that kind of thing. And when I see a dude that big move the way he moves, you at least garner some attention. And I'm like, yeah, it was against Georgia Southern, but like now he's on the list, right? Like that, he had a get myself on the watch list kind of game against Georgia Southern. It should be illegal to have this much.
It should. There was a lot of waivers we had to fill out to get this on.
We need to do a lot of paperwork.
There was a lot of paperwork to get this on here for you guys. So make sure that you subscribe to make all of that paper that we did worth it.
It's got to be worth it, damn it. But yeah, like I just thought Anthony Lucas, like anytime I get to see a guy that big move like that, I'm like, okay, I got to pay attention.
Bingo. And I'm glad you mentioned Alex Wright because my next guy is kind of in the same mold as the opposite guy. He's like an Isaiah McGuire. It's Cassius Howe from Texas A&M against Utah State, 2 tackles, 3 sacks. But here's what's important to note about those 3 sacks. They were back to back to back.
Insane.
Like they couldn't stop him. They said, okay, we gave up 1 sack. We'll figure it out. Second down, we give up another sack. Third sack. Okay. He was just in the backfield. This is a guy gets after the quarterback, has a lightning quick first step. It's important to note 19 sacks in the last 3 seasons between Texas A&M and Bowling Green. His final season at Bowling Green in 2023, he had 10 sacks. This is a guy for me, lightning quick first step, has a very good set of pass rush moves. The concern is he just doesn't really have the anchor strength against, power gaps and against double teams. So he gets a little bit washed out, especially in run defense. But if you're wanting a designated pass rusher, Cassius Howell's that guy, and you could get that type of guy at the top of round 4 and just plug him in. He could be a Joe Tryon Shoyinka replacement for the Cleveland Browns. They move on from him after a year, bring in Cassius Howell, and then, oh yeah, by the way, on third down, good luck trying to block Myles Garrett, Isaiah McGuire. Oh, we're going to throw Cassius Howell out there too. At a certain point, you run out of offensive linemen to block all of these powerful and speedy edge rushers.
I keep saying it, I keep thinking the Browns are probably not drafting an edge super high, but I like what they've got going on, and there's some pass rushers that I would just throw. I'm just like Ruben Bain. I know they're probably not using one of those first round picks on a guy like Ruben Bain, the pass rusher from Miami, but I just keep thinking, but what if? And Cassius Howell's one of those guys. He's not a first round guy yet. He might end up being there, but like you said, round 4, round 3, somewhere in that range. It's maybe they don't go that high, but if they do, it's just I'll never be upset for adding more pass rushers to an already stout defensive line.
Bingo.
I'll never be mad at you. Mekhi Lemon, the USC wide receiver. Listen to his Georgia Southern. Again, we know it's another USC guy going up against another cupcake, but against Georgia Southern, he had 4 catches for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. 115 yards were after the catch, and he forced 4 missed tackles, which is he's played 2 games and he's got 8 missed tackles forced. He had 4 in both games. He is explosive off the line of scrimmage. He's a 4.4 guy. He's not, I think he'll be in the mid 4.4s when he runs. He's got really good speed, but not elite speed, but he's an elite accelerator. He's going to get off that line of scrimmage and he's going to get up to speed. I love his route running. It's kind of a limited route tree in a sense. They don't ask him to run a ton of it, but the routes that he does run are really nice and crisp and sharp. And he also had a 75-yard touchdown in this game. But his athletic ability and his explosiveness, his change of direction after the catch allow him to create extra yardage. And you see this 115 yards after the catch is insane, especially considering it was on 4 catches. So 158 yards, it was only 43 of those yards came before the catch, came before the ball was in his hand. Mekhi Lemon's just he's smaller. He's a smaller wide receiver, and so you have some concerns against press coverage, but my goodness, he gets in and out of his breaks. He gets up to speed. He's so creative in the open field. He can make guys miss. He's just a dynamic weapon, and he really showed it last week.
Bingo. And you just hit the nail on the head. This is a guy as dynamic as you can get with the ball in his hands. I see a lot of Emmanuel Sanders in his game, and I think if you spent a top 75 pick on Mekhi Lemon, I know there's folks that love him in round 1 just because of how much he can do for an offense. Shout out to Corey Kinnan again. He talked about potentially Philadelphia in the back half of round 1 for Mekhi Lemon, which I just think would be absolutely unfair for the rest of the NFL at that point.
I think about that all the time with Philadelphia. I'm let's throw this guy in there, and I'm whatever.
Yeah. So speaking of wide receivers, I'm going to stick with wide receiver for my final stock up guy. Skylar Bell out of Connecticut. And listen, they played against Syracuse, lost in a heartbreaking fashion, dominated the entire game. And it was on the back of Skylar Bell, 11 catches, 105 yards, average depth of target of 9.5. But the biggest thing was this was a guy that when they had to have it, when they needed to move the chains, when they needed to get the ball in a position to succeed, he was them. He was the Elijah Surratt for UConn, like we talked about earlier. I look back at that fourth down play, one-handed grab that set them up to field goal range to tie the game up. Yes, he plays for UConn, so he's playing against lower level competition, so you have that conversation. But every time I turn on UConn tape, I watch his tape, and everything that I see is an explosive, smaller-ish inside-outside threat, ability to change direction very quickly, doesn't really have the long speed that you look for, but he's just efficient in short space. I see a lot of Rondale Moore without the injuries, of course. I've got him as a late day 3 guy, kind of somewhere in that round 6, 7 range. But I mean, he's climbing up my board pretty fast because he wasn't even on my watch list coming into the season because, he just does. He's Mr. Consistent. He's Mr. Reliable. He does the things that he needs to do to put UConn in a position to win. And shout out to Corey Kinnan again. He compared Skylar Bell's performance to the Greg Jennings, I put the team on my back performance. And that's exactly right. That's what he does, is he puts the team on his back to win. And if you haven't watched any UConn games, make sure you start watching and checking out for Skylar Bell.
I just love the Madden video of Greg Jennings when he runs. Have you seen the YouTube video?
Yeah, where he runs with the pulled hamstring and still gets into
I think it was a broken leg. I think it was a broken leg, and they auto subbed him back in, and he like limps for a 75-yard touchdown. So anytime I think about Greg Jennings, I just think about that YouTube video, and it's how ridiculous it was. All right, we are going to power speed through some of these stock down because we have been a little bit long-winded. So. Yeah, what a surprise. What a surprise. First up for me is Jaden Ott, the running back from Oklahoma. I only put his one stat on here against Michigan, 4 carries for 9 yards. I don't know if he's hurt, if that injury is still lingering from last year. I don't know, but he was a guy that I was very excited to get opposite John Mateer to help John Mateer. And I thought going to Oklahoma, he was a guy I liked in last year's class as a day 3 kind of guy, but in a very loaded running back class. But he went back to school, and I was like, well, that might be really good for him because I think he's really talented and he'll get kind of lost in last year's class. And I'm like, he'll go to Oklahoma and he'll, the former Cal transfer. And I'm like, he has his highlight from the first game was the muff punt. He muffed a punt. It's just, he's not getting the ball. And when he gets the ball, he's not effective with it at all. And it's not like he was a high guy. He's a guy I had higher expectations of what he's done. And it was like, I'm not going to bury the kid. We're not going to spend a lot of time on our stock down. We're just putting it out there. But he's just a guy, I thought he was going to have a bigger role. Maybe he gets that bigger role. But he was the kind of guy that was like, oh, he's going to be able to rush the ball from Mateer, give him a nice compliment to the passing game. And he just hasn't been able to do anything to start the season through 2 games.
Bingo, 100%. You're nailing the head. I don't know if it's the injury still affecting him or if it's just this coaching staff just doesn't have faith that he can stay healthy. But I think everybody that saw him at Cal fully healthy was disappointed in Jaden Ott. And my next guy, a lot of people have started to be disappointed in, it's Peter Woods from Clemson. Against Troy, only 3 tackles. Like, when you're playing a team like Troy, and it's the theme of the episode, when you beat up on these cupcake teams, you should beat up on these cupcake teams. Clemson looked absolutely mortal against Troy, almost lost the game, I'd argue. And Peter Woods, against Troy and then against also LSU, just hasn't looked like the guy people thought he was as defensive tackle number 1 and a top 5 draft pick. He just hasn't looked that way. And I don't know if it just feels like he's just coasting a little bit, or he's not locked in, or it's an injury issue. It's just not there. It's just not, the light bulb's not on for Peter Woods. And if he stacks up another game today against Georgia Tech like this, it's time to start being concerned about him.
Yeah, for me, me and you talked about it. It's like, has he been bad? No, but we thought he was going to be a top 5 pick, and he hasn't played like that. Like I don't think he's been bad. Like, he hasn't been great. Like, he's been kind of middle of the pack, but like, there were people, and I was probably one of them, that were talking about literally, if you're talking about a defensive tackle as being potentially the top, they're not going to go number 1 overall, but you can get a defensive tackle be number 1 overall on your board. Like, some people had him out of summer scouting as their number 1 player. And I think he was like top 3 or 4 for me. I don't have my summer scouting board up, But it's just like, yeah, like you said, Clemson has looked mortal a little bit, and like he's just been underwhelming. Same with Jaden Ott. It's like, well, Jaden Ott's actually just not been productive at all, but it's like you've just been disappointed. He's similar to my next guy, and that's Kenyatta Jackson, the pass rusher for Ohio State. Again, I don't think he's been bad. I just had higher expectations for him. He's had no pressures against Grambling State last year. He had 2 pressures against Texas, and he had 2 missed tackles. He still has a pretty decent pass rush win rate. And he's had some plays defensively, and he's made some plays. But against Grambling State, and he only had 14 pass rush snaps, and he had a little bit of a nagging injury against Texas, and that could be why he was a little ineffective against Grambling State. But he's a guy that has shown so many flashes when he was as part of the rotation in previous years, behind Jack Sawyer and JTT. And it was like, hey, Kenyatta Jackson's going to get this opportunity to go out there and be the guy. And he just isn't there yet. And so it's just kind of a little bit of a disappointment. We'll see. Faces my Ohio Bobcats today. We'll see how that goes. It could be a get right game for him, but it's just a lot of times with stock down early on. It's not like, hey, you're bad, go back to school, you suck. It's just like, hey, it's just not been where I thought it would be.
Yeah, just like my next guy, the expectations for him, Cade Klubnik out of Clemson. A lot of people had him as QB1. A lot of people had him as a number 1 overall pick. I wasn't there. I had him as a round 3, round 4 guy because the big thing, and it reared its ugly head against Troy. He struggles to handle blitzes, and he struggles to handle pressure, and he just crumbles. My comp for him has been Zach Wilson, the BYU version, because of how he handles pressure. And we saw it, 18 to 24 for 196 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. But that is against Troy, a team you are supposed to beat up on. But the big stats on the screen there, 55% completion percentage when he's blitzed this season. If NFL teams circle that and say, okay, if we blitz him, he will throw a 55% completion rating, they're gonna win that every time. He's got a game against Georgia Tech today that, against Georgia Tech, they're a tougher opponent. This has to be a get right game for him and Peter Woods. But if they both stack up another Troy-like performance, it might be time to start selling any stock you have on Clemson.
Yeah, No, I don't even really have anything to add. It's just, what I was going to say is a lot of his success that he did find was in the second half. The first half was bad. They were down 16-0 and it was bad. And then I think their superior talent kind of took over in the second half. Like that's just
bingo.
My guy's Lenore Sellers, my quarterback 1. I said last week he showed flashes of the guy that I think is an elite prospect. Against South Carolina State, again, should have been doing something against South Carolina State. 11 of 19, 128 yards, 1 touchdown. He started like 2 of 9. And they had like a punt return touchdown, like a fumble return touch. Like the score would have suggested their offense was doing something when it wasn't. He had a 30.4 grade under pressure last week. And that is something that he's had a problem with. Lenore Sellers is kind of a raw quarterback still. He's 20 years old, right? Like, or did he? Yeah, he's turned 20, or he's about
he turned 20, so he's 20 as of right now.
So like he's very young, he's very raw in the pocket, in structure. He's just not there. I don't think he trusts his eyes. He doesn't, because he's got the arm, and he's got the escapability. Like he's a great athlete, good speed, good power as a runner. I just think he doesn't trust his eyes, and if you speed him up by bringing pressure, he's going to crumble a little bit. It's been one bad game. We'll see how it goes from here. It's not getting easier from here for South Carolina, but he may be a guy who, this is funny because I don't know if you remember a conversation we had. We had a conversation very early in summer scouting, you and I did, where I talked about him as potentially being all the way back at like QB 5 or 6 for me because I thought he was potentially 2 years away in terms of like how raw he was. But in the end, the tools won out for me, so I put him at QB 1.
Yeah.
And coming up in 2 weeks, we've got a special episode where we'll be updating quarterback rankings. So you don't want to miss that episode in 2 weeks. Foreshadowing. But this was a game that made me think about back to summer scouting when I was like, hey, he might just need more time to develop as a passer and develop as a quarterback. And that's just what I saw against South Carolina State, which is not the be all end all, but it just might mean that you're not looking at him in 2026. We'll see how it goes from here. But that game made me feel like I did during the summer, which was he might not come out this year.
Bingo. And he's my quarterback 1. I'm with you because of the tools and the traits. But these are the types of games where you say, okay, he's also a redshirt sophomore. We need to pump the brakes here because he just looked overwhelmed. He didn't command the offense, which is the theme of the episode. When you're playing these cupcake teams, you've got to command your offense. And my final guy in stock down is a guy that I was high on. It's Miller Moss from Louisville, played James Madison last Friday night. Just didn't look comfortable. 13 to 23, 151 yards and a touchdown. Had time, almost 3 seconds time to throw in the pocket. So it wasn't like he was being blitzed or hurried. A lot of it was just he just didn't trust his eyes either. And that's the big thing when you're playing these cupcake teams. If you're being touted as a draft prospect, you've got to play above it. And I think one of the threads, as we've talked about it today, a lot of these prospects that are higher up on boards, I feel like played down to their competition rather than just saying, I'm a star, I'm a top 10 pick, or I'm a first round pick, or I'm a top 100 guy. I'm just going to beat you like that. I feel like a lot of them said, I'm playing Troy or I'm playing James Madison. I don't have to full throttle it this week. So that would be my takeaway from this week's episode is that, listen, if you are a top 100 guy or a first round guy or even a quarterback 1 against these cupcake teams, you've got to play like it. And if not, it's a pretty glaring flag for me.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. All right, before we get out of here, give me a matchup to watch this week for those that are hanging around.
Yeah, so the big matchup to watch this week is going to be tonight's game, Texas A&M versus Notre Dame. My wide receiver 1, Casey Concepcion, matching up against the Notre Dame secondary that historically has had a lot of players go in the league. They have a guy like Christian Gray, so how are they going to use him to get open? The other one I'll also mention, Florida versus LSU. Braylon Moore, the LSU center, going up against Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle. That's going to be a fun one to watch.
For me, it's Miami in South Florida down there. I talked a little bit on a written piece about this, about Carson Beck kind of looking like the 2023 Carson Beck and at the 2024. But now he goes against a USF team that really limited Florida. And I thought Florida, after their opening week offensively, I thought they looked pretty good. So I was like, this is a pretty decent offense that Florida has. And then UCF just kind of handled them. And now Carson Beck goes, he's got an average depth. Like, this was interesting because he's been incredibly efficient. He's had 0 turnover worthy plays through 2 games, which after the Carson Beck we watched in 2024, that's been a breath of fresh air. Because at Georgia last year, there were a lot of turnover worthy plays. Like it was not great for him. So it's been a nice start, but now he's going to start facing some opponents that, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. He played Notre Dame week 1. So don't get me wrong. Like, he has had one good, game out of the, like, good opponent. I mean, because he's had 2 good games. But can he start stacking those? He's throwing a lot of short, intermediate stuff. Like, he only has an average depth of target average depth of target of 7, which pretty much everybody else that are big prospects in this class have at least 9 yards. So he's throwing it 2 yards, shorter passes. So he's going to a lot more quick, and they've used a lot of screens and some things like that. But he's not going to be able to do that as the competition ratchets up. There we go. Boom. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, check that game out. That's a 4:30 game. So check that out there. We appreciate you guys so very, very much. We'll be back again next Saturday. Make sure you hit that subscribe, that like button. Until then, go Browns.
Go Browns.
Where's my button?